Living in a real-world minority report. According to the New York Times, the New York Police Department has quietly built a massive surveillance system that tracks the daily lives of millions of New Yorkers, whether they've committed a crime or not. The department has spent more than $3 billion on tools that monitor where you go, who you meet, and even what you post online. Elizabeth Daniel Vasquez, a former Brooklyn public defender, warns that this digital time machine turns ordinary life into permanent evidence. Teenagers in public housing can end up in a gang database, 99% of people of color, just for posting photos with friends. The New York Police Department seized more than 24,000 cell phones last year alone, feeding data back into the system. Civil rights advocates, including New York public advocate Humayun Williams, says these tools erode basic freedoms. And with the Trump administration ordering federal agencies to merge data systems, fears are growing that this surveillance could be weaponized far beyond New York. As Vasquez puts it, nothing would be more American than a law that confirms we each own our own information. Okay, so what's the real message here? Data collection, surveillance is getting more pervasive in every aspect of society. New York City, supposedly a bastion of liberal tolerance, is at the forefront of monitoring everything you do, every place you go, everything you see, everything you look at. And yeah, crime is down, which is great. But what happens if the federal government, for example, bans all abortion? And now the government can force New York City to hand over data showing, oh, you went to Planned Parenthood and came out a few pounds lighter, you go to prison. Let's dig a little deeper. I'm not one of these who thinks that all surveillance is bad. I have personally benefited from the fact that crime is much lower in New York City. I used to live there full time. I still spend a fair amount of time in New York. So I like the fact that I can sort of walk around knowing that crime is really low. And in fact, not that long ago, a good friend of mine and work associate spent time on a grand jury in Manhattan. And she said, well, TJ, it was kind of the easiest job ever rubber stamping, because the prosecutor would come in and said, oh, we think this person committed a crime. Here's the allegation. Oh, and by the way, here's 10 different video cameras all showing the person actually committing the mugging, the robbery, whatever the crime was. And it was simply irrefutable evidence. So every time it was rubber stamp, indict, 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 and convict, 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 went on a jury. So I don't want to be some absolutist here and say, oh, the government can never, ever be trusted. And let's go back to the 1990s, early 1990s, when there was relatively few monitoring cameras in New York City. And you know what? There were 2,000 murders, 2,200 murders in 1990. I'm willing to give up a little personal freedom in order to not be murdered. I think that is an acceptable trade-off, and I'm assuming a lot of you do as well. But when does it go too far? Because it's one thing to say, okay, with the current way politics is structured in America, I'm more worried about violent crime than I am about the government doing something evil. Well, if you had told me that 10 years ago, I'd say sure. If you told me that even 2 years ago, I would say sure. Now, I'm not so sure. Now, you may have a different political orientation. You may say you were worried 3 years ago and you're not worried now. Okay. The point is, all of us at some point have a vision of a government where we do not trust them to know every single thing about our lives, every place we've ever been, anyone we've ever associated with, being used against us in a court of law or in the court of public opinion. Because as we've seen recently, when the government's out to get you, they can just make allegations and push things out to the media and try and convict you in the media. And that is going to be no fun at all. Now, we've seen countless celebrities get wrapped into this Jeffrey Epstein thing. Some of them clearly knew what he was up to, what he was about, and knew his record and should be shamed. But there are plenty of other people who frankly didn't know anything about him. We're told, here's a guy who's rich, who likes to contribute to causes like yours. Can you come to a cocktail party, maybe at his house, where there are 200 other people You shake hands once, maybe get a check to support your charity and leave, and you never even thought about it again. And now here we are 10 years later, and you're a part of some big scandal. I do have a little bit of sympathy for people like that because I can tell you, nobody I know vets every single person, nobody you know vets every single person they've ever associated with. Yes, if you live in a small village and you've known the same 150 people your whole life and you never go more than 50 miles away, yeah, I guess it's possible. If someone has a bad reputation in your town, you just always shun them. But for anyone living in a big city or New York City, or anyone who's active in national life and national philanthropy or science or raising money for a university or foundation, to simply say, I'm never ever going to go to a party without knowing the background information about every single person, you have to be a hermit. That's not really plausible. And yet, is that what we're going to require? Is that what a sane person is going to have to do, given the reality of what's happening in New York City and also other cities, metropolitan areas around the country, where we live in a surveillance state? Now, here in the US, we hear all the time about in China how there's this surveillance state and they're rating you constantly. But it's happening in the United States too. I'll be honest with you, unlike a lot of pundits who says, this is always wrong and this is 100% right and I'm outraged, I'm going to be upfront with you. I don't know what the perfect line is as far as having security cameras with government access to it in public. Certainly, we don't want them inside your own private house. But again, with the government's ability to access your cell phone, that is gone as well. The assumption of privacy. We're going to be following this story as it comes from time to time. I want to thank you again for joining me. Thanks for Janice stopping by to say hello. I appreciate your comments. If you are watching live, I always take the time to look out at the comments. It says, Janice says, that's an in-depth overview of our surveillance state. Thanks, TJ. You are welcome. I try to bring you what I think is a curated list of combination of the most important stories that have happened in the last 24 hours and the most interesting stories that maybe are not front page stories, but are in the news and are journalistically sourced from reputable news-based organizations. Put that out for you as a summary, and then together we have a conversation and try to piece together what really makes sense from an individual standpoint. What can we learn as individuals on how to communicate better, on personal development skills that will make us navigate our way through this modern world we live in.